Good evening, captive audience fans. Welcome once again to another wonderful Wednesday. Don Anderson here with Sunny Danforth. Sunny, what say you?
Hey, it's real hot over here in Northeast Oregon. The news
How
is
hot is
hot, the weather's hot.
hot? Trump is hot. So
Hell, Trump
that
is
begs the
really
question,
hot. He's on fire.
how hot is it?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I think it's about close to 100. It's 104 yesterday was our high.
Ooh,
It was
wow,
really
that
hot
is
yesterday. So
hot.
yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, we haven't hit triple digits yet, but I was down in the Willamette Valley, Central Valley at Mount Angel, and it was probably 90, low 90s. And we haven't had that yet, so you're not accustomed to it. So I was definitely feeling it. And then I was in Bend Monday and Tuesday. I did some mountain bike riding, and I'd forgotten about the fact that Bend's at like 4,000 feet, number one. And number two, it was like 90, 95 degrees. And so I was in Hurt City. But at least I'm proud to say I was able to finish the ride, which ain't bad for an old guy, number one. But my excuse
Good.
was I forgotten about the altitude. So there's my excuse.
Well, I'm glad you got to get out and
But
have some fun and go ride.
that I always forget how gorgeous Bend is. This time of year, it seems like the sky is bluer there. It's just it just seems like it's bluer. It's just great. So
Wow.
that was
Good.
a good time. Yeah.
Sounds
But of
like
course,
fun.
politics didn't stop. Yep, the political world didn't stop just because I was out in that beautiful place, and so it's got back, caught up with some things, and I think one of the most interesting, unique things I heard was this whole tax status change that occurred, and I think what it was back in '57, LBJ, before he became president, pushed this legislation that impacted the IRS that essentially said that in order to maintain their tax exempt status, organizations like churches, in particular nonprofits, could not speak on things political or have positions on that. Now, what I didn't know was before that they could. So everything we've seen in the last 60 years is really
Yeah.
relatively new. Before that, they could. Then they couldn't. But basically, the IRS has made a change and they've reverted back to the way it was before 1957, which means that now churches and other nonprofit organizations are in a position to have political positions. The ramifications of that are, I think, ginormous. Your thoughts?
I think it is too. And it comes back to freedom of speech because just because you're a nonprofit or a church, you should be having a freedom of speech. Our churches, with following our Constitution, we have the right to express our religion in any fashion, right? As long as we're not hurting others. And we have freedom of religion. We also have the free speech, the right to speak, except for, yelling fire in a crowded theater type of thing. And so this is huge and I think wonderful, getting back to following our Constitution, reversing this Johnson Amendment. And I think it's a big deal. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you went out for a little bit there and you came back. Audience is hearing, but
Oh, well,
I heard quite a bit. Then it stopped,
I was,
but you're back. So I'll try to.
well, that's
But anyways,
okay. Well, I was saying, I don't know what the audience heard either. And actually, I saw you were frozen and I wasn't. And so I don't know. But I think it's wonderful that the reversal of the Johnson Amendment
yes, yeah,
for
it's
freedom of
just such a
speech.
huge move. And see, a couple of things. Number one, it's about freedom of religion. It's not about freedom from religion. So that's the first thing. And the left has always used that as a cudgel against conservatism. And I don't doubt for one second that this was very strategic. What Johnson did back in the late '50s by basically
Yeah.
what do you call it, gagging conservatism by keeping churches in a position because that's our natural base. And somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 60% of the population still goes to church at least once a month and still has a religious affiliation. And we all know which way they're likely to lean. Talk about a built in ground organization. You talk about a built in ground game. That's something that on the conservative side we've never been able to have. We don't have Hollywood. We don't have the sports world. We don't have big media. We don't have big tech. We don't have Fortune 500. We don't have any of that stuff. But you know what we do have? There's a church on practically every corner still in this United States of America, and they still have a huge influence. This might be one of the biggest wins ever, unless I'm misreading uh, the meaning of that change. For us to be able to churches and start saying, vote for the individual who most likely aligns with your religious beliefs. And it's going to be very easy to make that leap in terms of who those people are. Wow. How cool is that?
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. It's giving
So
back the
I'm
power of the pulpit.
absolutely. And the other thing too is it's a recognition back to the basic foundations of the country. I mean, if you travel this country, one thing you'll say for sure, no matter what your religious beliefs are, you can't go more than a mile or two, even in the bluest of blue cities, and not see a church. I mean, they're everywhere, which tells you that
Mhm.
the country's foundational principles are, well, they start with morality, which goes to you can't have a constitutional republic without a moral people, and you sure as heck can't keep one without moral elected officials. And we need to go back to looking at that. And I think this is a great opportunity to take us back to that. So I just think this is awesome. It's the hugest win of the day. They won't get that much coverage, but I think it's huge.
I agree. I agree. We're going back to following our Constitution, and it's one
Mhm.
step at a time. And some steps are baby steps, and some steps are large ones. And I think this is a large step for freedom of speech.
Yeah. And another large step, I saw this yesterday. I think I was in Bend and I wasn't seeing the news. But when I got back, I saw that ICE had gone to Los Angeles, probably one of the biggest, what do they call these cities that subvert the law? Uh,
Sanctuary city.
Yeah, how can I forget that term? One of the biggest sanctuary cities in the country. And so ICE landed there and they promptly lost their minds. I think that's one of the most awesome things ever. And the place they went, and I'm not sure the familiarity that the audience has with Los Angeles, but I know LA really, really well. So MacArthur Park is dead center Los Angeles, like right smack downtown. It's not as big as Central Park, but it's a big footprint in LA. And it's been completely taken over by illegal immigrants and gangs. And it had been taken over by gangs clear back in the 90s, which is when I was there. It wasn't so much Hispanic gangs then as it was the Crips and Bloods. But since I've moved, I understand it's completely like, Hispanic gangs now, or I should say Mexican illegals now have pretty much taken over that park. So, what a statement by ICE to go into that park. And if you watched that, the park was completely empty, which I thought was awesome. Basically, they got out of Dodge City, which is exactly what we want to have happen. And B, my brother-in-law sent my wife a message, and someone had done a Google search around what the traffic was like in Los Angeles, and the traffic patterns the last few days have been like way off. Like nobody's moving around. Why is it, you wonder? That's
You
pretty
know,
interesting.
I
So has there been that much illegal immigration? Go ahead.
You know what? I saw something on X that showed, when
Mhm,
you're driving or you're Googling a pathway, it'll show you red on the freeway where it's all stopped in traffic, right? And then it'll show you green.
mhm,
And so it showed you, okay, this year, or I don't know, today, this is what the traffic looked like. And it was all green in LA, all the freeways.
mhm,
And then there was some time ago, I don't know with a distance or when the other picture was, but it was showing all the freeways red. So is the illegal causing a lot of the traffic issues? I don't know. I don't know. But it's interesting to see the difference. I must be freezing up. Dawn is frozen up right now for me. I don't know, Dawn. I'm sorry, my friend. You're freezing up.
Yeah, I
I see
suspect.
myself moving.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure which of us it is because I see the same thing with you, but we'll work through this. Um, I I suspect that we don't have any data to prove one way or the other, but I suspect that the impact of the ice and the impact of these raids is causing people to self deport. I really think that's starting to happen. Think to yourself, let's say on the conservative end, 10 million people came into the United States illegally. And we know California got a huge percentage of that. And Southern California, of course, would get a huge percentage of that. So let's just say there's 3 million, and that's probably conservative. There's 3 million illegals in LA County, right? Well, if you take half of them off the street, that's 1.5 million people. That's what, 10% of the people in the LA
Yeah.
basin? It's bound to have a huge impact. So being being ultra conservative, I'm going to just suspect that that's a part of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I agree. And also it would be, oh no, ICE is in town. We're going to hunker down. You know, they don't want to leave yet to go try and self deport yet. We would see the freeway from Los Angeles down to Mexico absolutely red if they were self deporting because they have to go south, right? And,
Mhm.
but definitely they might be hunkering down, staying in their cribs, you know, so that they're off the streets. They're not going to get picked up. They hope. I don't know.
Right. So they hope. But I think it's a positive. And there's a lot of other cases out there. In fact, I, saw like there was some ice raids here locally out near Sherwood, like in the wine country, that sort of thing. And of course, the local media is making a whole lot of noise about the unfairness. They're not picking up criminals and all these other things. But here's the thing: if they're here, what do they not understand about illegal? If you're here illegally, that's breaking the law. Are we going to decide which laws we're going to keep and which laws we're going to enforce and which laws we're not going to enforce? You enforce the law. Obviously, the objective right now is to get the criminals, the ones who are doing, felony type crimes. But if in the course of doing that, you're going to run across other people. And if you do, you arrest them and you send them back.
Yeah.
And people are having a lot of problems with that. And then, of course, the big argument they love to make is they're doing jobs that American citizens won't do. And that's simply not true. They're doing jobs that American citizens won't do for sub minimum wage.
Right.
And are we going to continue to let and this goes back to letting our blue collar workers get shafted by folks from across the border. And this argument they love to make about, oh, everything's going to go up in price. Well, let's set that aside for a minute because I don't believe that for a second. But what no one talks about are the offsetting costs of having illegals in the country. I mean, let's say our prices did go up, but no one's taking into account how much are we paying for all the additional crime that's happening? How much are we paying for all of the stresses on the school system? How much are we paying for all the impacts on the medical system? There is no way it's a net gain for us to have all these illegals in the country. It is a net cost, no matter how you slice it. So just enforce the law. If you don't like the law, change the law. That's something Democrats hate doing because that means they have to go through the legislative process and they hate that. So they use the judicial process to usurp it. Now that's been shut down by the Supreme Court here recently. So they're, as they say in the street, they're straight out of luck, which is exactly the place we want them to be. So
True.
there you
And
go.
now also Tom Homan, I've got an article up here from K2 ABC News that border czar Tom Homan plans to visit Portland amid all these ongoing ICE protests. And I am so glad to see that. I'll tell you, they have right now charged, as of this article was actually yesterday, but they have charged 22 individuals with crimes of assault on federal officers at the ICE facility, processing facility in South Portland. And
Well,
and I welcome Tom Homan coming to Oregon. And the governor's going, oh no, you can't do that. Oh yes, they can. Immigration is strictly a federal. It is the federal government's authority. The state has no authority over that, and I'm very, very happy. And sanctuary states are actually sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. That goes against the Constitution. What are you a sanctuary from? Oh, we're an immigration sanctuary? No, that's in our Constitution, that is a the federal government is in charge of our immigration. And frankly, our president is, and Congress can make laws regarding our border. And I'll tell you, it is. And going back to your point about who's illegal, what is illegal? And it is, yes, when you cross the border, you come into America unlawfully, uninvited, without papers, without visa, and in the dark of night, you are coming into the country illegal, and that's the first law that you broke. And then for those, there's going to be, I had an opportunity to hear Tom Homan speak actually a couple of times at Judicial Watch roundtable that I went to. And he said, there's going to be sob stories of, oh, you've got this person who's lived here for 20, 25 years. Wait a minute. This person that they just picked up, while they might not be a bad criminal, yes, by gosh, they've lived in America for 15 years, 20 years, but they had a judgment already that said they must leave. The decision was already made by the immigration courts that they were to leave the country, and they chose to stay. Well, you just don't get to continue staying and breaking the law, because now they were here illegally, or they were here on a visa, and then their visa expired and they just decided to stay. That is breaking the law. Illegal is illegal. And it is frankly, an immoral person that is willing to break the law and stay in a country illegally. After having traveled, and I know you have as well, Don, I've had to apply for visas before I get into countries. I've had to apply for extensions to stay in a country and comply with their immigration laws, because I didn't want to get thrown in jail. Even though I wanted to stay in a country longer than my visa allowed, it was no. Well, I guess that's my moral high ground, is no, I'm going to follow the laws of the country that I'm in. And so people that are here and overstaying their visas or overstaying their court orders to leave this country flatly are here illegally, and go home, deport them.
and well, that's the thing. A lot of them they've been here 10, 20 years. You've had plenty of time to fix it, and you didn't deal with it. Well, that's that's on you. You had lots of opportunity to fix it. A lot of them, they just didn't fix it. And this whole argument that, oh, what about the children, sort of a thing. Well, we put people in prison all the time, and they have children. If dad goes and does a crime, dad goes to jail. And the kids are like, just that's how it is.
Yeah.
So they can take their kids with them, or they can leave them with another relative. But either way, you got to go, and then you can apply and come in the right way. It's really as simple as that. And we got to stop. We can't afford to keep doing it, is
No.
the other side of this. It's not even a choice. We just cannot afford to keep doing it.
And I want to add another thing. Okay, they say, oh, we have a housing shortage. Well, with the illegals living in houses, this will actually open up more housing with them leaving, and rents will come down, because the only reason rents are high, it's supply and demand. When there's a lot of inventory that is open for rent, or for sale, the very same thing of selling houses. When there's a lot of inventory, the price comes down. When the inventory is very low, then the price goes up. It's natural supply and demand. This is business. So it will actually open up housing even. And, I do want to agree totally with your point of the people working. Um, I have not, I have not met many Americans that are going, I'm not going to take that job. Truthfully, you know what? Because if you are to a point of your life going, I really need a job. Well, there's jobs out there. And you might not like that job. You might not want to make a career out of that job. But if it helps keep a roof over your head and food in your mouth and for your family, you'll take the job. And I just don't, I think the illegals have definitely held the wage down and even some people not working. So, and
Yeah.
I want them so much not getting our welfare and our SNAP programs. There's so many ways that it has affected and cost our state and our nation so much money housing them. And it's so unfair to the senior citizens in our country that have uh, worked here for a long time and are getting just a small pittance of a social security check. And then the illegals are getting, several $1,000s a month. Hello. And they've never worked here. It's
Yeah.
insane. And this has to stop. It's just not right.
Well, as usual, and it always smashes the underclass and the working class first. I mean, those of us who have the resources, we can postpone the pain coming our way. A lot of times people just simply move or move to a better neighborhood or get away from it. You can afford to do that. But most of the lower classes, middle working class people don't have that option. And so they're stuck. So it's their schools that get destroyed, their medical systems that get destroyed. It's the funds that would go to them that wind up going to these people who aren't even here illegally. It's terrible. And then to your point, also, they work sub minimum wage. And a lot of these companies will pay them less than what the minimum wage is. And this whole lie that they say Americans won't work doing those jobs. Yes, they will, but they can't afford to work for it for $5 an hour or something. Precisely what's happening. A lot of this data is not being reported. So I see a huge plus coming. So we're going to have Americans being able to get jobs that are paying them at the rate they should be getting paid. Number one, you're going to see housing, just like you said, housing prices will come down because there won't be a ton of people here who shouldn't be here, thereby driving up the prices of the rental market. So there's so many pluses associated with this. And the taxpayers at large save a fortune because they're not spending money on people who then, by the way, send like 30 billion of it back to Mexico. I can't remember the exact figure. It might be it was some really high number. It was 60 billion that they just repatriate back to, it doesn't even benefit here. So
Yes.
yeah, there are huge pluses. And then one other thing I had to say too, and this goes back to I love the fact that home is coming to Portland. Every sanctuary city should get a huge visit from ICE. That should be the flag. You say you're a sanctuary city, all right, we're coming. Because basically what has to happen is the federal government has to establish who's boss. The Democrat Party has already put us through this once, and it resulted in a civil war that killed 600,000 people because
Yes.
they wanted to they chose to follow some laws and ignore other laws. Never forget, this is the party of slavery. They wanted slavery. They caused a civil war for slavery. So don't put it past them to do it again. People might say, "Oh, Don, that's ancient history. They did that 100." Can you imagine the Republican Party did something like that? They would never let us live it down. But this is the party of slavery. This is the party of concentration camps for the Japanese in World War II. This is the party of standing in the schoolhouse so black kids can go to school. This is the party of LBJ, and I'll make it so we'll own those in votes for the next like 100 years. This is that party, and conservatives, Republicans don't say that enough. I mean, I hardly hear it at all, actually, except for a few people. But that needs to be shouted from the rooftop. They should have to defend that all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Tom Homan had said that he said that they are going into sanctuary cities. Um, he says we're not going to be bullied, and we are going into sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. And President Trump, he said, explained it 2 weeks ago. We're going to double down, triple down in the sanctuary cities. Why? Not because they're blue, because we know they're releasing public safety threats to the streets every day. And that is what it's about, is public safety.
And I tell you, a lot of these people in these blue cities are in favor of that. Now, they're not brave enough to say it out loud, but
Oh, yeah.
but if your neighborhood has got, like, homeless people hanging out in front of the streets all the time, you're afraid to walk out at night, you're afraid for your wife and children, you appreciate the fact that this is getting done. You just won't say it out loud. You might vote it, though, and I do think we're going to see a significant move in these next midterms. I really do, and this is one of the reasons why. We finally have an administration that's not afraid to boldly get in their face. They've been doing this to us for the last 40 years
Yes.
without a response. So I am so thrilled that we are finally back at you. You give us that energy, it's coming right back to you. And I think this is great.
Me too. Me too. We
Well,
need that accountability.
absolutely. And another thing that's changed, I call it the culture shift. You can feel the culture shifting. And in fact, I wrote a rant on this the other day. Maybe I'll bring it back for next week. But and I can't remember where I read this, but it was someone said men lose their minds quickly, but come back to they regain their sensitivity, their sensibilities slowly. And what the speaker was referring to is how an entire population can get gaslit to doing something insane, and they'll do that really fast. Then you go 5 or 10 years later, they'll gradually start thinking again, and you look back and think, how in the world did we wind up doing that? So think about the French Revolution. Robespierre gaslit the population. They wound up like executing like nuns and priests with a guillotine, like 30,000 people in like a 3 year period, right? 20 years later, it's like it never happened. You look at what happened in Rwanda, right? The Houthis and the Tutsis, right? I can't remember how many, but 800,000 Tutsis got like with machetes in the space of like a year. Now it's like it never
Yeah.
happened. We were gaslit into doing that by, guess what? Their government, right? You look at what Hitler did, same thing. And typically, the way these governments do these things is whenever there's hard times, they identify someone who they can target as being the problem, the reason for the problem, even though the government caused the problem. And of course, with Germany, it was the Jews. In Rwanda, it was the Tutsis. In gosh, in Russia, it was uh, the kulaks, right? In the Ottoman Empire, it was the Armenians, right? And then they go out there and slaughter these people and use them as the cause of this whole thing.
Mm.
And you look at the United States. I think in the last few years, we've been gaslit like crazy on a whole bunch of issues. But the one I wanted to point to specifically was this whole LBG2 transgender, I don't know who I am issue. And look at how crazy that got. For the last few years, you felt like you couldn't say anything against it. But now we're coming back and getting our senses back. And
Yeah.
one of the indicators of that was what happened at the University of Pennsylvania recently. It was a Penn. I think it was Penn. Essentially, the swimmers were issued an apology by the university. That was number one. Number two, they got their medals back, and they
Hmm.
stripped the medals away from the man who was swimming against them. And you got to stop and get your arms around this for a minute. How in the world did we let that happen? To just get in the face of men for a minute. How did we let our wives, our sisters, our daughters, and our mothers be forced to go into the bathroom with a grown blank man? How did we do that?
Right.
It's like
Right.
so insane, you can hardly believe it. But basically, we were gaslit into that by our press, and people were afraid to speak up and say the obvious, that there's something wrong with a man who thinks he's a woman, he's going to go into a women's bathroom, or a man who wants to compete against women because he couldn't compete with men. And we were unwilling to say the obvious. But we're reaching a point where we're willing to say that now, and it's starting to show up, in law and in public discourse.
Well, it is. And right here in Oregon, I've got to say that 3 Oregon high school student athletes, filed a lawsuit over the state's transgender athlete policy. And this was filed in federal court. And it was a attorney, Lee Ann O'Neill, from one of the lawyers at the America First Policy Institute, filed this lawsuit in federal court on behalf of 3 student athletes, with claims of Oregon's policy violates Title IX by discriminating against women. And the suit names the Oregon School Activities Association, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, and 3 school districts as defendants. And this is what has to happen here in Oregon, where they're saying, no, we're going to put the men competing against the women in athletics, and this is wrong. This is why we have Title IX. This is why we have men's and boys sports and women and girls sports. That's it. And there is no reason to put a man that is disillusioned and thinking that he is now a woman. Oh, I just believe I am, so therefore I am, and you must believe it too, to compete in this. It's ludicrous. And I'm very happy to see that because of the pressure of President Trump and the Trump administration, that there's a lot of pressure of losing school funding and states losing funding because of this putting men and boys in women's and girls sports. I'm happy to see this lawsuit.
Yeah, it's just awesome to see this and to see this cultural. We're taking back the culture war, which we weren't even engaging in the culture war. Look at all the things that have happened in the last 30 years, and we just let them run with it. So you first had the elimination of the 10 Commandments in the school. They weren't saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school anymore. No more "My country 'tis of thee" in the school anymore. No more crosses in public places, and we just keep letting them get away with this. No more Western civilization at the major universities, and the conservatives, because we're nice and we don't want to like hurt anybody's feelings, we can't keep letting them run us over. Before you know it, you go from no commitments and 10 commandments in school, and suddenly you wind up with a giant. That's a little turd. Then you wind up with a giant turd in the form of like gay marriage. Now it's like finally you start waking up, but now our backs are to the wall. So the good news is at least we realize we're in the war. We're finally firing salvos back, and we're starting to get wins again. And that represents this represents a win. What's happening in Oregon? What's happening in Maine is another one where we're like in the attack mode there with their crazy governor. So that's good news. And I also saw there was I can't remember the names of the schools. 3 university hospitals are being sued in federal court over chopping children. And the 3 big ones too. And I want to say the names of them and get them wrong, but there's 3 big ones that are being sued for this. So that no longer is going to be the money-making, excuse the pun, operation that it's been. So putting a stop to clearly immoral things, chopping minors. I mean, I can't even imagine what kind of a doctor would do such a thing. But it's great to see, though, that something that 4 or 5 years ago you couldn't even have a conversation about, now we're finally putting a stop to it. Because at the end of the day, these people are suffering from a mental disorder, and we need to tell them that so they can get help.
Absolutely.
And the whole thing is we're too kind and nice and soft, but kindness, when you're dealing with Marxists and communists, kindness is a fast way to get yourself killed.
Yeah.
It really is. And now we know that. It doesn't mean you have to be mean and nasty, but you need to be firm. Here's the line.
Yeah.
You're a man. I'm not gonna call you a female pronoun. This is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And it is there's in this article, there's a fellow who says, we can just have they want to compromise. have a compromise to still allow this boy or man in women and girls sports. And well, if they win, we'll just award four uh, medals. No, no. The person you have, we absolutely have to be firm in that and say no. And, and that just goes right along with what Lori said. She says, this all ends when we, the people, say no. And that has to be the answer is no. If they want to make
Mhm.
a third group and let the trans, all those people with mental illness, compete amongst themselves, so be it. But girls and women need to have their sports, and men and boys have theirs. And then the rest of them need the mental health institution to figure out theirs, because I do believe that that's part of it. It is a mental, especially when in the young and trying to through the schools, through the libraries, trying to groom kids, convince them that, oh my gosh, if you want to be a cat, I have a friend in Washington State that about 4 years ago told me about his son in his son's class. They had furries, and I had never heard of furries, Dawn. And so they had a student that was, wore a cat costume, and they put a litter box in the restroom in the class. And I'm going, and to your
Mhm.
point, no, the answer's no. You need to get the counseling for your child. But they have liberal
And
parents, and this is all part of
yeah,
bringing the chaos.
yeah. And it's funny, my daughter told me about this stuff about 10 or 15 years ago, when she was at
Wow.
community college. And I laughed at first. I thought she was
Wow.
kidding. So like, oh no, Dad, they're really doing this stuff. And and you got to realize, and this goes back, I'm stealing somebody else's thunder. I don't want you to think I thought of this brilliant conversation I'm about to give to you because I stole it from somewhere else. I just can't remember the guy's name. So I was listening to talk radio this afternoon, and this guy was explaining how these Marxists work. And this ties back into what we were just talking about. So basically, here's a quick and dirty history. So if you go back to the 19th century when Karl Marx got started with this whole thing, they thought that they would win over people to communism by going into societies where things were utterly train wrecked. And you'd have a group of people who had a lot of reason to be disaffected, by the way. So take, for example, if you're a factory worker in London in the 1870s, you got a whole lot to gripe about. You're working 15 hours a day. You're not getting paid very much. Conditions are terrible. You got child labor. It's like pretty ugly. Well, those are places that are more ripe for that. I'm not saying it's the right solution, but I'm saying you can see how you could justify doing it in, like, let's say Germany, right? Or let's say Russia. And so that's what they did. And they were successful. You look at the conditions of those countries when these things happen. You had Great Depression, you had famine, you had like just insane circumstances. Same, so that happened. That worked in Russia. That worked in East Germany. That worked all over Eastern Europe. You go all over South America. They had the conditions for that. They've been wanting to get this in the United States with all of their might, but they've been unable to get it because we haven't had conditions like that. This has been such a great and phenomenal country that even the poor do well
Yes.
here. So you can't get enough people who are disaffected to get that going. So they change strategies. So rather than go to the working class and be to get the proletariat that way, they shifted to the disaffected class. And if we can get enough people disaffected, we can get them to buy into this thing. So that's where you see things like the whole climate
Yes.
crowd, right? These are crazy disaffected people. Plus, you create disaffected people with your university system, which keeps telling them how horrible their country is, how horrible their parents are, how horrible their religion is. So you got a whole group of people that we're literally raising Marxists, is what we've been doing with the public school system, not to mention the university system. So the climate crowd, the feminist crowd, of course, um, the so feminist crowd, communist, the climate crowd, and just go down the list. Of course, the DEI
Oh, yeah.
crowd, and of course, the reparations crowd. So you tell Black people over and over and over and over again how horrible it is for them, even though their standard of living has gone uh, up through the mid '60s when the Johnson administration got started. The trajectory was fantastic. It started going south when they started putting in these poverty programs, which
Yes.
they're aptly named poverty programs because they created more poverty.
Yes.
So now you have these huge swaths of Americana, and the soil is ripe to sell Marxism, communism. And I thought it was just a brilliant discussion. Like I said, I didn't create that one. I'm aware of all those pieces, but I thought he put that together nicely. And so they're constantly looking to create more disaffection. And these people are looking to destroy
Yes.
for the most part. It's not to create anything, it's just to tear down and destroy.
And that's where you get the Antifas and the BLM, causing the chaos. And I believe too, to go along with that is we had COVID it killed a lot of the middle class in America. There were so many businesses that closed because of COVID. And so when you have more people that are disenfranchised, it brings about the chaos for potential change to communism. And I just thank God every day that Trump won the election and it was too big to rig, and that we are in the process of turning things around. And I'll tell you that big beautiful bill that just passed, we're going to
Oh,
see positive ramifications from that for years to come. They're not finished. Realize he's just 6 months.
yeah.
He's just a few weeks shy of 6 months of being in office. And there is so much that has gone on. It's crazy.
What I love is it's taking a wrecking ball to the entire infrastructure. We're not dancing around the edges. We're not being nicey nice about it. I love the aggression. I've been begging for this ever since the Reagan administration. I watched, and I'm sure you did too. I watched the election where I think it was McCain ran against Obama. That was like the worst
Yes.
campaign in history. It was like maybe McCain really was a complete rhino. I don't know. I sort of suspect he was scared to death of Obama because Obama was a color, not white. I'm not even gonna say it was black, whatever he was, right? But McCain was afraid to engage the guy. It was like he didn't run a campaign at all. That was the worst of them. Of course, you had Romney and Bush and the rest of it's like going to Dairy Queen and getting the softest ice cream you can get. These guys were afraid to engage, and no one's engaged since Reagan. So when Trump came along with all his hard edges, I was
Me too.
thrilled that we finally have somebody who's willing to bloody a nose, because when you're dealing with a bully, what bullies respect is
Yeah.
another bully. That's what they respect, right? And or a bigger bully, and this is like just awesome. It just goes back to things like having ice go right down the throat of the belly of the
Yes.
beast. Portland,
Yes.
Los Angeles, Seattle, Baltimore, we're coming. If you don't like it, tough. I just think that's what you have to do. You have to send a message, because one thing these people aren't used to is somebody punching them back in the face.
Yes.
Um,
And
so this is
And we need the law and order brought back because we have had lawlessness for far too long. With the whole defund the police movement, that there's so many things that have gone on that are getting undone, and coming back to the we didn't have, as you and I were growing up when we were kids, we had law and order in our country. Yes, there would be a protest. I mean, look at all the protests that happened, with
Mhm.
the, uh, oh, geez, I'm trying to think of the war. Yes, thank you.
Vietnam.
I was so glad my brother didn't have to go. But,
Yeah.
there were protests, but it was nothing like what is happening, the type of things that are happening now. And some of those protests were actually quite violent, but
Mhm.
I still don't believe that it was like it is today.
Well, the difference is this: the government went in, and maybe they were a little too rough with some of the. Well, in certain cases
Well,
they were,
yeah, that's
sure,
right.
but there was an attempt to impose law
Mhm.
and order. I mean, you knew that they were going to try to impose law and order. This is well, the first time since the Civil War, where the government, local state officials have been going against the federal government, have been trying to manufacture more of it. I think that is the difference.
Bingo.
And I yeah, yep. I remember sitting here watching this stuff, and I'm old enough to just barely remember the
Yeah.
68,
Yeah.
69, 72, all the stuff that was going
Yeah.
on then. And yes, there were some riots that got out of control, but eventually, if they needed to call in the National Guard, they did. If they didn't, the local police handled it. I was in LA when that happened, but at no point in time did the local officials ask for more of this stuff.
Right.
This is the first time in our lifetimes they've done that.
Yes.
Yeah, which tells you they're trying to states can't pick and choose which laws they're
No.
going to follow. We've already been down that path.
No. And
But
so
that's the
I'm liking the response that the Trump administration is giving, because we have to get
Mhm.
back to law and order. And yes, there's going to be some things that where our federal government is not going to tolerate, because that's not when you have what's been going on in Portland happening. That is not freedom of speech. It is
Mhm.
not, and it has to get shut down. So
Yeah.
yeah, bring it on.
And I had to tell one quick story, the personal story that just happened to me this weekend in Bend, that I think is so illustrative of what's right and what's wrong with the country. So we went on this bicycle ride, and the teenage son of one of our friends dropped his wallet on the bike path, and I can't remember the Sun River. I guess we're at a Sun River. He dropped his wallet, and we sat around and met. What should we do? What should we do? And finally, I said, you know what? Out here, somebody's going to take it to the office and give you a call anyway. Don't even worry about it. We weren't out 30 minutes before the cell phone rang. And that's precisely what happened. Now, why? And then I'll tell you another example. I was on my racing bike, probably 15, 20 years around here, and I didn't even know I had lost my ID, fell out of my pocket or something. And somebody called, and he returned, he knocked on my door and gave it back to me. And it was like $25 in there, untouched. The significance of that story is it points to the observation of the moral code. Both of those events happened in places where you predominantly had people who weren't living in
Yeah.
chaos, people who were generally going to do the right thing. Now, whether they're religious or not, whether you're religious or not, you're impacted by Judeo-Christianity, which is why you would do the right thing, right? So that's what you have. One of the big problems in the blue cities is they no longer live by that code because the family's been train wrecked. And when the families are train wrecked, you start living in chaos. And when you turn on the TV and you see a blue city, that's what you're looking at. So we have to bring that back. And the way you bring that back is you have to enforce the law in the first place. You cannot have a lawless society. Freedom can't work that way. Like Tony Beretta used to say, if you do the time, you got to do the crime. If you do the crime, you got to do the time, right? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is we have to rebuild those institutions that put us in a position to raise moral
Yeah.
people. Without it, all of this stuff's just patches on the real problem until we fix that. But I think we're headed in the right direction.
I do too. I do too. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
too. Absolutely.
Well, but I had to quickly comment just a couple of things in the big beauty. For those of you who haven't followed it, I wrote down a couple of things here. Got my little piece of paper here because it's Sunday. I'm getting old. I can't remember stuff. So here's just a few of those things. So no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Think about the insanity of that. What's the fastest way to reduce productivity of a citizen? You tax the overtime, they're not going to do the overtime. Do we want to encourage that? No, we don't want to encourage that. If people want to work overtime, let them work overtime, put it in their pocket. It's great for everybody. No tax on Social Security. The common sense of that always blew my mind. I remember learning that. We tax Social Security? I remember hearing that when I was in my 30s. Why would we do that? They've already worked.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense. The child tax credit permanent for 40 million American families, that's going to be popular. And I love this, we're getting rid of the Biden era green energy tax credits. What a drag on the economy that has been. I mean, windmills all over the place that, well, we know the story is they don't produce any energy. Hey, and most of those things are made in China, by the way. And I can't remember, I think it was Trump pointed out in one of his news conferences, I don't see those damn windmills in China.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a reason for that.
Why the hell doesn't China have
Yes,
them?
where they're made,
That's one
where
of the
they're
best.
manufactured.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. Allocates $350 billion, 350 billion for defense, and Trump's mass deportation initiative to weed out illegal immigrants from the United States, which is just huge. I mean, this whole thing, and then of course there's the whole tariff issue and making these folks meet our tariffs. Why are we paying for your goods and you're taxing us differently? I think it's common sense and it's fairness, and all of these things combined, and making NATO pay for themselves.
Yeah.
By the way, why are we paying to defend you? We got 3,000 miles of ocean between our enemies. You're the ones with the issue. You pay for it. I think it's just sensational. It's common sense.
Well, it is common sense. This is the common sense president, and the common sense
Yeah.
administration, and it's absolutely the theme of what they're doing. And I'm really happy with what he's doing with the tariff and the trade um, that he's making to make it fair for America. He just wants to be fair. Whatever you charge
Oh,
us, we'll charge you. But if you're not, like he said he held a press conference, but I didn't get to watch the whole thing. But the part that I did see,
mhm,
he said, you know what? I've sent the tariff letters off. And if they want to do business with us, this is the tariff. And if they don't want to do
yeah.
business with America, we're the largest economy in the world, that's okay too. That's their decision. Let them decide what they want to do. And you know what? That's okay. We don't need to continue paying the rest of the world to and lifting the rest of the world up, because that's where our tax dollars have gone. And this is one of the partly how we got in so much debt. And
Mhm,
it's just been unfair, and it's time to go back. Time
yeah.
to absolutely go back and make things fair. And he would like us, as from what I've gathered of his speaking, is he would like to go back to a tariff where the tariffs are the income driver for America, and the citizens don't need to pay income taxes. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
amazing? Because
Well, I saw the comment from yeah, I saw the comment from Pat out there about getting what is it, Pat that said get the
yeah,
IRS down? Yeah, he did speak to that a while back, and if you go back to the McKinley administration, that's how it was done. We didn't have an income tax. Tariffs paid for everything, and I suspect that that's not off the agenda, but you have to do one thing at a time, right? But I suspect that after these midterms, that might be the next thing. Things work out well the way they're working, we start raising a fortune, which we're already raising a fortune from those tariffs already. You talk about a move that would just blow
oh
things
yeah,
up, and it will completely strip the Democrats of their power, which
yes.
is basically to tax us to death and implement all these communist programs. You take that power away
Mhm.
from them, the country's back to the way it was at the beginning.
Well, absolutely. And this is where there's so many things in that one big, beautiful bill. This is about those that are on welfare. You've got to work. If you're getting aid and on Medicaid and whatnot, if you're able to, if you're able to, you need to be able to work. And that's what it needs to be. We cannot have, I will tell you, under Obama, I remember this. Under Obama, there was more people signed up for to be on disability.
Yeah,
It grew horrendously. And I'm going, my God, everybody wants to be on disability, and I'm just going to
sure.
get that free money. Well, there is no such thing as free money. But for the illegals that are on disability, you darn right it's free, because they haven't worked a damn day in their life in America and contributed to it. But it's on our backs. So there's
Oh,
so many good things that are in that one big beautiful bill. And I have to show this. Speaking of that, this is the East Oregonian. I don't know if you can read this. If I was on my computer, which is broken, by the way, I'm on my cell phone. It would be able to be read. But this is the East Oregonian newspaper that I got today in the mail. And the headline on the front page above the fold is that my congressman, Cliff Bentz, draws fierce backlash. um, because my congressman, CD2, Cliff Bentz, the only Republican congressman for the state of Oregon, is supported and voted for the one big beautiful bill. Hooray, Cliff. Thank you very much. Because CD2 is gigantic. It's over half of the landmass of the state of Oregon. And let's see, it was the Oregon Democrats and the nurses, and of course, the governor. And I'll tell you what, this is the headline. They want the people to believe that people are not happy with Cliff. Well, let me tell you, the voters in his district are very happy because this is a conservative district, and they are very happy that he voted for this. So this is just noise. That's all this is noise. Propaganda. The propaganda of the East Oregonian.
Well, you ever wonder why these publications like the Oregonian are losing money hand over fist? This is
Yeah.
the reason why. They just lie. I mean, if you want to have things with an editorial opinion on them and have those kinds of opinions in an editorial, fine. But they try to print these things as fact, which they aren't. And I think people are seeing past it, and they're just not interested in reading their paper anymore. And the same thing is true of the major networks, or CNNs, ABC, CBS's. Now they're getting sued over it. Everybody knows it. And now alternative publications and ways of getting information, like what you're looking at now, are sprouting up all over the place. So these papers are like doomed.
Well, they are. In fact, speaking of being doomed, the East Oregonian used to be I'm trying to think if it was a daily paper a long time ago that would get delivered to our house. Then it became a 3 days a week newspaper. And the East Oregonian bought up all the little town newspapers all around where I am in Northeast Oregon. I'm in Umatilla County. They bought the newspapers in Umatilla County. They bought them in Baker. They bought them in Union, and I don't know about Wallowa. I think they just acquired Wallowa's paper this past year. And they bought all of these little papers, and then you have the East Oregonian, the biggest propaganda thing on the east side of the Cascades. And but now it comes one day a week. No, let's see. Yeah, I think it's only one day a week in print, in the mail. No, I think it comes twice. It comes 2 days a week in the mail. It's real thin. This is only, let's see, it goes to the front section is 12 pages. And the back one is, of course, a gigantic ad, right?
Yeah, they're just not financially viable.
No, they are not. And anyway, I just had to put that out there. It's not an ad, certainly, for the East Oregonian, but it's about talking about the propaganda media.
Yeah, and I love what's happening. Hey, this is one of those things, and they're aging out too, because think to yourself, who gets the paper anymore? Probably the oldest part of the population, or the only ones, and the leftist oldest at that, are the only ones who are doing that. So the market growth, young people aren't doing that. They're going on the internet to get that information, and they're more likely to come across stuff like this, which is exactly what's happening. So the trends are all in our favor, but we just need to stay aggressive. Don't be kind. Be firm. That's what I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we are bumping up against that. I can't believe an hour just went by, Sunny. But I'm going to let you close this out because, well, it's only appropriate.
Oh, well, thank you, Don. And everybody, I want to let you know that this is my last Wednesday with Don Anderson. And if you didn't hear on Friday, I had made an announcement that actually we are moving to Florida. We're going to be summer birds to Oregon. We're going to winter over in Florida. Although that's going to be where our residence is. Our plan is to just summer over here. We'll see how that goes. But live in Florida. And So I think Friday is probably my last episode of Captive Audience, unless I get called back, and I believe I will. I'm no pressure there, Don, as a
Oh,
special
you
guest.
will be called.
But
You will definitely get called.
and I love our captive audience very much, our audience of captive audience. And it has just been so much fun for these multitude of years of doing this. And I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot, and I hope that people have enjoyed this. And I know that I'm going to miss it too, but I have some things that I'm going to be working on over in Florida. One is the move and a lot of work on this house that we're buying. So I will be busy, and I will also be fishing. I love to fish. I love to fish in the ocean, and I will be swimming in the ocean. So I do look forward to that. And but I'll be back. It's not gone and lost forever. So Don, thank you very much. I love working with you. I've loved our time together so much. You are a great friend.
Thank you so much, Sonny. And I would say, I just thank you for inviting me to come on the show with you. I have had a blast these. I think it's been like
Yeah.
3 years. I can't
Yeah.
believe it. All good things must come to an end. So, I was kind of thinking this might happen someday. It happened sooner than I wanted it to happen. But the great news is due to the nature of this, we can still have you come in as a guest periodically, and I'm looking forward to that too. And hopefully, I can maintain the same fantastic standard that Sonny's maintained over these last 5 years or so that you've been doing this. And that's been awesome. And thank you for being such a great audience too. But I'm going to really miss this the pinging back and forth that we seem to have natural simpatico,
Yeah.
and it'll be impossible to replace. So thank you, Sonny. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Don. And thank you, everybody. Like and share.
All right, everybody. Good night and God bless America.
Good night.